In the bustling spaceport of Surferia, a dazzling array of alien species mingled and conducted their business. Amidst the colorful crowd, a striking humanoid girl named Lakaya stood out like a supernova. With her shimmering silver hair and mesmerizing amethyst eyes, she was a vision of ethereal beauty. Yet despite her allure, Lakaya found herself perpetually alone. The reason? Her constant companion, a massive alien beast known as a draken, which resembled a Siberian tiger from Earth. With its razor-sharp claws, gleaming fangs, and piercing emerald eyes, the draken struck fear into the hearts of all who beheld it. Lakaya had raised the draken, whom she affectionately called Zion, since it was a cub. To her, Zion was a loyal friend and protector, but to others, the beast was a terrifying monster. Wherever Lakaya went, Zion followed, and the alien males who might have sought her company quickly retreated in the face of the draken's menacing presence. As Lakaya wandered through the spaceport, Zion padding silently by her side, she couldn't help but feel a pang of loneliness. She longed for someone to see past Zion's intimidating exterior and appreciate the gentle soul within. Little did she know her life was about to change forever. Sergeant Grayson Hamilton, a rugged human soldier with chiseled features and piercing blue eyes, strode through the spaceport with purpose. He was on a mission to deliver crucial intelligence to his superiors, but as he navigated the crowded terminal, a flash of silver caught his eye. Grayson turned to see Lakaya standing mere feet away, her beauty stealing his breath. But what truly captured his attention was the magnificent creature by her side. The draken regarded him with an appraising stare, its emerald eyes seeming to peer into his very soul. Without hesitation, Grayson approached the pair, a warm smile on his face. Lakaya tensed, expecting him to recoil in fear like all the others. But to her astonishment, Grayson knelt before Zion and extended his hand. "Hey there, big fella," Grayson murmured, his voice low and soothing. "Aren't you a handsome one?" Zion cocked its head, studying the human with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Slowly, the draken leaned forward and sniffed Grayson's hand, its whiskers twitching. Then, to Lakaya's utter shock, Zion nuzzled against Grayson's palm, a deep purr rumbling in its chest. Grayson chuckled, scratching behind the draken's ears as if it were a house cat. Lakaya stared at the scene before her, her heart racing. In all her years, she had never seen anyone approach Zion with such fearlessness and gentleness. A strange warmth bloomed in her chest as she watched Grayson interact with her beloved companion. As if sensing her gaze, Grayson looked up and met Lakaya's eyes. A jolt of electricity seemed to pass between them, and for a moment, the bustling spaceport faded away, leaving only the two of them. "I'm Grayson," he said, rising to his feet and extending his hand to her. "Grayson Hamilton." Lakaya hesitated for a heartbeat before placing her delicate hand in his. "Lakaya," she replied, her voice soft and melodic. "And this is Zion." Grayson grinned, his eyes sparkling with warmth. "It's a pleasure to meet you both." As they stood there, hands clasped and gazes locked, Lakaya felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. Perhaps, just perhaps, she had finally found someone who could see beyond Zion's fearsome exterior and appreciate the bond they shared. Grayson glanced at the digital display on his wrist, his brow furrowing. "I'm afraid I have to go," he said, reluctance heavy in his voice. "Duty calls." He released Lakaya's hand, his fingers lingering for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. Lakaya barely registered the loss of contact, her mind still reeling from the surreal encounter. "It was wonderful meeting you, Lakaya," Grayson said, his eyes holding hers. "And you, Zion," he added, giving the draken a final scratch behind the ears. Zion let out a contented purr, leaning into Grayson's touch. Lakaya stared at the sight, her eyes wide with disbelief. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Grayson's smile widened, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners. "Perhaps our paths will cross again." Lakaya managed a nod, her voice still lost in the whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. With a final nod, Grayson turned and strode away, his broad shoulders disappearing into the crowd. Lakaya stood rooted to the spot, her heart pounding in her chest. She raised a trembling hand to her forehead, trying to process what had just happened. Zion nudged her other hand, its emerald eyes filled with concern. Lakaya glanced down at her companion, a shaky laugh escaping her lips. "Did that really just happen, Zion?" she whispered, her voice tinged with awe. "Did he really just—" She trailed off, unable to put into words the significance of the moment. In all her years, no one had ever approached Zion with such fearlessness and gentleness. No one had ever looked at Likaya with such warmth and genuine interest. Likaya took a deep, steadying breath, trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach. She looked in the direction Grayson had gone, a part of her longing to chase after him, to ask him 1,000 questions. But he was gone, and the moment had passed. Likaya shook her head, a small, disbelieving smile on her face. "Come on, Zion," she said, her voice still slightly breathless. "Let's go home." As they walked towards the spaceport's exit, Likaya's mind raced with possibilities. She knew with a certainty that defied logic that her life had just changed forever. And though she couldn't explain it, she had a feeling that the rugged human soldier with the kind eyes and gentle touch would play a significant role in the chapters to come. Days turned into weeks since Likaya's chance encounter with Grayson Hamilton, yet the memory of their meeting lingered in her mind like a persistent melody. She found herself replaying every detail, the warmth of his smile, the gentleness of his touch, the way he had fearlessly approached Zion. Likaya went about her daily life, tending to her duties as a xenobotanist at the Surferian Institute of Intergalactic Flora. She immersed herself in her research, studying the myriad plant species from across the galaxy. But even amidst the lush greenery of the Institute's gardens, her thoughts drifted to a certain pair of piercing blue eyes. Zion, ever attuned to Likaya's emotions, sensed the change in her demeanor. The Draken would often nuzzle against her hand, offering silent comfort and support. Likaya would smile, scratching behind Zion's ears and murmuring words of affection. As much as Likaya tried to push thoughts of Grayson aside, fate seemed to have other plans. One evening, as Likaya and Zion were walking home from the Institute, a commotion erupted in the streets ahead. Shouts and screams filled the air, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of blaster fire. Likaya's heart leaped into her throat as she saw a group of armed thugs, their faces obscured by masks, terrorizing a crowd of innocent civilians. Without hesitation, she rushed forward, Zion by her side. "Hey!" Likaya shouted, her voice ringing out above the chaos. "Leave them alone!" The thugs turned, their blasters trained on Likaya. She stood her ground, Zion growling menacingly beside her. "Well, well, well," one of the thugs sneered, his voice muffled by his mask. "Look what we have here, a pretty little thing playing hero." Likaya's eyes narrowed, her hands clenching into fists. "I said, leave them alone." The thug laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "And who's going to make us? You and your overgrown house cat?" Zion snarled, its hackles rising. The thug took a step back, his bravado faltering for a moment. Just then, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "I believe the lady asked you to leave." Likaya's heart skipped a beat as she turned to see Grayson Hamilton striding towards them, his blue eyes blazing with determination. He was dressed in civilian clothing, but the way he carried himself left no doubt that he was a soldier through and through. The thugs turned their blasters on Grayson, but he didn't even flinch. With a speed and precision that left Likaya breathless, Grayson disarmed the nearest thug, sending his blasters skittering across the ground. Chaos erupted as the thugs charged at Grayson, but he met them head-on, his fists and feet a blur of motion. Likaya watched in awe as he took down one thug after another, his movements fluid and graceful. Zion, not to be outdone, leaped into the fray, its powerful jaws and razor-sharp claws making short work of the remaining thugs. Together, Grayson and Zion made an unstoppable team, and within minutes the thugs lay groaning on the ground, their weapons scattered and useless. Grayson turned to Likaya, his chest heaving and a sheen of sweat on his brow. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Likaya nodded, her heart racing for an entirely different reason now. "I'm fine," she managed, her voice slightly breathless. "Thanks to you and Zion." Grayson grinned, his eyes sparkling with mirth. "I think Zion did most of the work. I just provided a distraction." Zion let out a contented purr, rubbing against Grayson's leg. Likaya couldn't help but smile at the sight. "What are you doing here?" she asked, curiosity getting the better of her. Grayson's expression turned serious. "I was on my way to the spaceport when I heard the commotion. I couldn't just stand by and do nothing." Likaya felt a surge of admiration for the man before her. Not only was he brave and kind, but he was also selfless, willing to put himself in harm's way to protect others. "Well, I'm glad you were here," she said softly, her eyes meeting his. For a moment they stood there, lost in each other's gaze. The world around them seemed to fade away, and Likaya felt a fluttering in her stomach that had nothing to do with the adrenaline of the fight. Grayson cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "I should probably go," he said reluctantly. "I have a ship to catch." Likaya nodded, trying to ignore the pang of disappointment in her chest. "Of course," she said, forcing a smile. "Thank you again for everything." Grayson hesitated, as if he wanted to say something more, but then he shook his head, a rueful smile on his face. "Take care of yourself, Likaya," he said, his voice warm. "And you too, Zion." With a final nod, Grayson turned and walked away, his broad shoulders disappearing into the night. Likaya stood there watching him go, a bittersweet ache in her heart. She had thought their first meeting was a chance encounter, a fleeting moment that would fade into memory. But now, as she replayed the events of the evening in her mind, she couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at work. Fate, it seemed, had a way of bringing them together. Zion nudged her hand, its emerald eyes filled with understanding. Likaya smiled, scratching behind the Draken's ears. "Come on, Zion," she said, her voice soft. "Let's go home." As they walked through the quiet streets, Likaya's mind raced with possibilities. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. Grayson Hamilton had once again left an indelible mark on her life, and she had a feeling that their story was far from over. Weeks turned into months, and still Likaya couldn't shake the memory of Grayson Hamilton from her mind. She threw herself into her work at the Surferian Institute of Intergalactic Flora, hoping to distract herself from the gnawing sense of longing that had taken root in her heart. But even amidst the beauty and wonder of the Institute's gardens, Likaya found her thoughts drifting to the rugged human soldier who had so fearlessly defended her and the innocent civilians from the armed thugs. Zion, as always, remained a constant source of comfort and companionship. The Draken seemed to sense Likaya's inner turmoil and would often curl up beside her as she worked late into the night, its warm presence a soothing balm to her troubled soul. One day, as Likaya was tending to a particularly delicate species of bioluminescent orchids, her supervisor approached her with an exciting proposition. "Likaya," Dr. Vontar said, her silver eyes sparkling with enthusiasm, "I have wonderful news. The Intergalactic Botanical Conference is being held on Earth this year, and I want you to be one of our representatives." Likaya's eyes widened, her heart skipping a beat at the mention of Earth. "Me?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "But why?" Dr. Vontar smiled, placing a hand on Likaya's shoulder. "Your research on the symbiotic relationship between the Surferian moonflower and the Draken has been groundbreaking. The scientific community on Earth would be thrilled to hear your findings." Likaya felt a rush of pride at her supervisor's words, but it was quickly overshadowed by a sense of trepidation. Earth, the planet where Grayson Hamilton hailed from. The thought of being on the same world as him, even if the chances of their paths crossing were slim, sent a shiver down her spine. I don't know," Likaya said, her voice hesitant. "Zion, I can't leave him behind." Dr. Vontar's smile widened. "Of course not," she said, her tone reassuring. "Zion is as much a part of your research as you are. He'll be coming with you." Likaya's heart leaped at the prospect. A chance to visit Earth, to share her research with the brightest minds in the field, and to have Zion by her side. It was an opportunity she couldn't pass up. "All right," she said, a smile spreading across her face. "I'll do it." And so Likaya found herself on a ship bound for Earth, Zion by her side. As the stars streaked past the viewport, she couldn't help but wonder if fate had once again intervened, leading her to the very planet where Grayson Hamilton called home. The conference was a whirlwind of activity, with scientists from across the galaxy gathering to share their latest discoveries and insights. Likaya's presentation on the symbiotic relationship between the Surferian moonflower and the Draken was met with resounding applause and a flurry of questions from the eager audience. As the conference drew to a close, Likaya found herself wandering the streets of the city, Zion padding along beside her. The towering skyscrapers and bustling crowds were a far cry from the tranquil gardens of Surferia, but there was a certain energy to the place that Likaya found exhilarating. Lost in thought, Likaya didn't notice the figure approaching until a familiar voice called out her name. "Likaya?" She turned, her heart leaping into her throat as she saw Grayson Hamilton striding towards her, a look of surprise and delight on his face. "Grayson," she breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. He closed the distance between them, his blue eyes sparkling with warmth. "I can't believe it," he said, shaking his head in wonder. "What are you doing here?" Likaya's heart raced as she met his gaze, 1,000 butterflies taking flight in her stomach. "I'm here for the Intergalactic Botanical Conference," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Dr. Vontar insisted I present my research on the symbiotic relationship between the Surferian moonflower and the Draken." She paused, taking a deep breath to steady herself. "It's been a whirlwind, but I'm so grateful for the opportunity. I never imagined I'd be here on Earth, sharing my work with the brightest minds in the field." Grayson listened intently, his expression one of rapt attention. "That's incredible," he said when she had finished. "I always knew you were brilliant, but to be invited to speak at the Intergalactic Botanical Conference? That's a huge honor." Likaya felt a blush creep up her cheeks at his praise. "Thank you," she said softly. "But what about you? What brings you to the city?" Grayson's expression turned serious. "I'm on leave," he said, his voice low. "After our last mission, I needed some time to clear my head." Likaya's heart clenched at the mention of his work. She knew being a soldier was dangerous, but the thought of Grayson putting himself in harm's way made her stomach twist with worry. "I'm glad you're taking some time for yourself," she said, her voice gentle. "You deserve it." Grayson smiled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "Thanks, Likaya, that means a lot." They stood there for a moment, lost in each other's gaze, the bustling city fading away around them. Zion, sensing the charged atmosphere, let out a soft purr and rubbed against Grayson's leg. Grayson chuckled, reaching down to scratch behind the Draken's ears. "Hey there, big fella," he murmured. "It's good to see you too." Likaya watched the interaction, her heart swelling with affection. Seeing Grayson and Zion together, the easy bond they shared made her realize just how much she had missed him. "Listen," Grayson said, straightening up and meeting Likaya's gaze. "I know this might be a bit forward, but would you like to have dinner with me tonight? I know a great place not far from here." Likaya's heart skipped a beat at the invitation. A chance to spend more time with Grayson, to talk and laugh and simply be in his presence. It was everything she had been longing for. "I'd love to," she said, a smile spreading across her face. Grayson's answering grin was blinding. "Great," he said, his voice warm. "I'll pick you up at 7. As they parted ways, Likaya couldn't help but feel a sense of giddy anticipation. Fate, it seemed, had once again brought them together, and as she walked back to her hotel, Zion by her side, Likaya couldn't shake the feeling that this chance reunion was just the beginning of something wonderful. As the sun began to set over the city, Likaya found herself standing in front of the mirror in her hotel room, her heart racing with anticipation. She had spent the better part of an hour trying on different outfits, wanting to look her best for her dinner with Grayson. Finally, she settled on a simple yet elegant dress in a deep shade of purple, the color complementing her silver hair and amethyst eyes. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach. Zion, sensing her nervousness, patted over and nuzzled her hand, its emerald eyes filled with reassurance. Likaya smiled, scratching behind the Draken's ears. "Thanks, Zion," she murmured. "I don't know what I'd do without you." A knock at the door startled her out of her reverie. Heart pounding, Likaya opened the door to find Grayson standing there, a bouquet of flowers in his hand. "Wow," he breathed, his eyes widening as he took in the sight of her. "Likaya, you look stunning." Likaya felt a blush creep up her cheeks at his words. "Thank you," she said softly, accepting the flowers with a smile. "You look quite handsome yourself." And he did. Dressed in a tailored suit that accentuated his broad shoulders and trim waist, Grayson looked every inch the dashing soldier. His blue eyes sparkled with warmth as he offered her his arm. "Shall we?" he asked, his voice low and inviting. Likaya nodded, taking his arm and allowing him to lead her out of the hotel. Zion followed close behind, its presence a comforting reminder of home. The restaurant Grayson had chosen was a cozy little place, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. The soft lighting and intimate atmosphere made Likaya feel instantly at ease, and as they settled into their seats, she found herself getting lost in conversation with Grayson. They talked about everything and nothing, from their childhoods to their hopes and dreams for the future. Grayson listened intently as Likaya spoke about her work at the Surferian Institute of Intergalactic Flora, his eyes shining with admiration and respect. "You're amazing. You know that," he said, shaking his head in wonder. The way you've dedicated your life to studying and preserving these incredible species. It's inspiring." Likaya ducked her head, feeling a warmth spread through her chest at his words. "Thank you," she said softly. "But what about you? I can't imagine the bravery and selflessness it takes to be a soldier, to put your life on the line for others." Grayson's expression turned serious, his eyes taking on a faraway look. "It's not easy," he admitted. "There are times when I question whether I'm making a difference, whether the sacrifices are worth it." He paused, taking a deep breath. "But then I think about the people I've helped, the lives I've saved, and I know that I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." Likaya reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. "You're a hero, Grayson," she said, her voice fierce with conviction. "Never doubt that." Grayson smiled, his eyes soft as he gazed at her. "Thank you, Likaya. That means more to me than you know." As the evening wore on, Likaya found herself getting lost in the magic of the moment. The food was delicious, the conversation flowed effortlessly, and Grayson's presence made her feel warm and safe in a way she had never experienced before. When the waiter brought out a decadent chocolate dessert, Grayson's eyes lit up with delight. "I've heard that the chocolate here is out of this world," he said, his voice filled with anticipation. Likaya smiled, the rich aroma of the dessert making her mouth water. "It certainly looks delicious," she said, picking up her fork and taking a bite. The moment the chocolate touched her tongue, Likaya let out a soft moan of pleasure. The flavors were rich and complex, the texture smooth and creamy. Grayson watched her reaction with a grin, his own fork poised over the dessert. "That good, huh?" he asked, his voice teasing. Likaya nodded, savoring the taste. "You have to try it," she said, pushing the plate towards him. Grayson took a bite, his eyes widening in appreciation. "Wow," he said, shaking his head in wonder. "You weren't kidding. This is amazing." They shared the dessert, trading bites and savoring each moment. And as they did, Likaya couldn't help but let out a soft moan of pleasure. Grayson's eyes darkened at the sound, his gaze fixed on her lips. Likaya felt a shiver run down her spine at the intensity of his stare. As they left the restaurant, Grayson took her hand in his fingers intertwining with hers. Likaya felt a jolt of electricity at the contact, her heart racing in her chest. They walked through the city streets, the cool night air a welcome respite from the warmth of the restaurant. Zion padded along beside them, its presence a comforting reminder of the bond they shared. When they reached Likaya's hotel, Grayson turned to face her, his expression serious. "Likaya," he said, his voice low and intense. "I know we haven't known each other for very long, but I feel a connection with you that I've never felt with anyone else." Likaya's heart skipped a beat at his words, her breath catching in her throat. "I feel it too," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Grayson reached up, cupping her cheek in his hand. Likaya leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with desire. Likaya nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. And then his lips were on hers, soft and warm and perfect. She melted into the kiss, her arms winding around his neck as he pulled her closer. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing heavily, their eyes shining with emotion. "Wow," Grayson said, a grin spreading across his face. "That was amazing," Likaya finished, a matching smile on her own face. They stood there for a moment, lost in each other's gaze, the world around them fading away. And in that moment, Likaya knew that she had found something truly special. As she bid Grayson goodnight and made her way back to her room, Zion by her side, Likaya couldn't stop smiling. The evening had been everything she had hoped for and more. And as she drifted off to sleep that night, her dreams were filled with visions of a future with Grayson by her side, their love growing stronger with each passing day. The days that followed were a whirlwind of joy and excitement for Likaya and Grayson. They spent every moment they could together, exploring the city and getting to know each other on a deeper level. Likaya found herself opening up to Grayson in ways she never had before, sharing her hopes and dreams, her fears and insecurities. And Grayson listened with rapt attention, offering words of comfort and encouragement whenever she needed them. In turn, Grayson shared his own struggles and triumphs, painting a picture of a man who had faced countless challenges and emerged stronger for it. Likaya couldn't help but admire his bravery and resilience, his unwavering commitment to making the universe a better place. As the end of the conference approached, Likaya found herself dreading the thought of saying goodbye to Grayson. The idea of returning to Safiria without him by her side felt like a physical ache in her chest. One evening, as they sat together in a quiet park, Zion curled up at their feet, Grayson turned to Likaya with a serious expression on his face. "Likaya," he said, his voice low and intense, "I know this might seem sudden, but I can't imagine my life without you in it." Likaya's heart skipped a beat at his words, her breath catching in her throat. "What are you saying, Grayson?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Grayson took her hands in his eyes shining with love and determination. "I'm saying that I want to be with you, Likaya. Not just for now, but forever." Likaya felt tears spring to her eyes at his declaration, her heart swelling with joy and love. "I want that too, Grayson," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "More than anything." Grayson pulled her into his arms, holding her close as he pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Then let's make it happen," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "I'll talk to my superiors, see if I can get a transfer to Safiria, and you can continue your incredible work at the Institute." Likaya pulled back, her eyes wide with surprise. "You'd do that for me?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. "Leave Earth behind and start a new life on Safiria?" Grayson smiled, his eyes soft as he gazed at her. "I'd do anything for you, Likaya," he said, his voice filled with love. "You're my everything." Likaya felt a rush of emotion at his words, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. She leaned in, capturing his lips in a passionate kiss that left them both breathless. When they finally broke apart, Grayson rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed in contentment. "I love you, Likaya," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Likaya smiled, her own eyes shining with tears of joy. "I love you too, Grayson," she said, her voice filled with certainty. "Forever and always." The months that followed were a flurry of activity as Grayson and Likaya worked to make their dream a reality. Grayson secured a transfer to the Surferian military, while Likaya continued her groundbreaking research at the Institute. And through it all, Zion remained a constant presence, a symbol of the unbreakable bond that Likaya and Grayson shared. As they settled into their new life together on Safiria, Likaya couldn't help but marvel at the twists and turns that had brought them to this moment. From a chance encounter in a crowded spaceport to a love that transcended the stars, their journey had been nothing short of incredible. And as she looked into Grayson's eyes, saw the love and devotion shining back at her, Likaya knew that she had found her forever home. In the end, it was their love that had conquered all. The love between a human soldier and an alien botanist, between a man and a woman who had found each other against all odds. And as they stood together, hand in hand, watching the Surferian sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold, Likaya knew that their love would endure, no matter what challenges the universe threw their way. For they had each other, and they had Zion, and together they could face anything. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, Grayson pulled Likaya close, his arms wrapping around her in a tender embrace. "I'm so grateful for you, Likaya," he whispered, his voice filled with emotion, "for the love and light you've brought into my life." Likaya smiled, her heart overflowing with joy and contentment. "And I'm grateful for you, Grayson," she said, her voice soft and filled with love, "for showing me that true love knows no bounds, and that even the most unlikely of connections can lead to a lifetime of happiness." They stood there lost in each other's embrace as the stars began to appear in the sky above. And in that moment, Likaya knew that she had found her forever home, her forever love. And as they walked hand in hand back to their home, Zion padding along beside them, Likaya couldn't help but smile at the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. A journey of love, of courage, and of the unbreakable bond between two souls who had found each other against all odds. A journey that had proven, once and for all, that love truly did conquer all.